motion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I move private business members item 2326, standing in my name on the business paper today.
Yes, thank you. And now you should simply proceed to speak. It may be that I prematurely moved your motion and should put the call in. So please proceed now.
Thank you, Mr. President. This motion covers 3 pages of the business paper today and runs to 10 numbered paragraphs, which I won't read out. It traverses matters that have been well canvassed in this place in recent weeks, which goes to the issue of the extent of the power of this House to compel the production of state documents from the Executive. The contention of the House is that this power extends even to at least some Cabinet documents, as long as those documents do not reveal internal workings and deliberations of the Cabinet itself. And this understanding and view is derived from a reading of the judgments of Chief Justice Spigelman and Justice Priestley in the Egan and Chadwick case, even though they were on different sides of resolving the particular dispute in that case. You can glean in their opinions a 2-1 majority in favour of a more expansive reading of the power of this House than has been accepted hitherto by state governments of both persuasions. But nevertheless, this House persevered in its desire to compel the government to produce the stadium's business case, the Powerhouse Move business case, and of course the Tune report on out-of-home care. And despite some significant resistance over a number of weeks, the government did indicate belatedly it would comply, and we assume, and I'm happy for the Leader of the Government to confirm this, we assume there has been full compliance with the resolution of the House. When the material was delivered to the clerk at 5 o'clock on that Friday afternoon before the long weekend, there was an accompanying letter from the Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet which asserted that the compliance with the resolution of the House by the government was voluntary and was not under compulsion, which of course, and in doing so the government was cavilling with the view of the House itself. Well, I acknowledge that interjection, but it raises a further problem because at the same time the government sought to claim privilege over the stadium's business case and the Powerhouse business case, all 10 volumes of the preliminary and final businesses case under the order in relation to the move of the Powerhouse. Now, you don't have to be a very experienced lawyer to know that if you have possession of documents and you claim there is a legitimate privilege over those documents, but then you voluntarily give them over to someone else, you waive your privilege. You abandon that privilege, which means that the recipient of those documents is free to publish them in full or make whatever use of them they can. So this government was really trying to have it both ways. Its compliance with the order of the House to meet a political imperative, they claimed was voluntary, but at the same time they were asking the House not to publish these documents in full.
Order, order.
Mr.
Chadwick will have his opportunity if he seeks the call. He will allow the Leader of the Opposition to be heard in silence.
So the government was trying to have it both ways. Meet the political imperative to get themselves and the Leader of the Government out of some difficulty through, well, I think you were, but we can test it again if you wish, to get the Leader of the Government out and the government out of difficulty while not actually accepting the power of the House. Now that puts this House in a difficult position because if we took the government at its word, we should publish both sets of documents in full for the whole world to see. But see, this is where the government was trying to snooker the House because they know that the majority in this House are responsible, would exercise this significant power proposed in the House with restraint, and we are mindful of the words of Justice Priestley and Egan and Chadwick, which said that the House not only has a responsibility to safeguard the public interest, but must not publish documents which are inimical to the public interest. And so the government knew that we would exercise this power responsibly, and they believed that they were able to have it both ways. And that is why I brought this resolution to the House this morning, to set out clearly the view of the House about that production of documents by the government, and to set the record straight, and to put clearly on the record our understanding, or at least the understanding of the majority of this House, as to how and why the government did comply. We don't expect the government to necessarily accept this, although it would be useful if they did, because it would clarify matters going forward. If the government persists in resisting the majority view of the House and as to the powers and the extent of the powers of the House, what they are doing is they are inviting a further exploration of these matters through further calls to order, further calls for the production of state documents. It would be a much better approach if the government engaged constructively with the opposition and other parties here in the chamber to work out a sensible approach about how these matters should be dealt with in future calls for papers, so that we do not have this ongoing dispute between the government and the House about the extent of the House's powers and prerogatives. I don't think I need to take matters further this morning. I would invite honourable members to reflect on this. If we don't pass this resolution and we step back from this, we are accepting the view of the government that the government was under no obligation to produce these documents. If we do that, it may well then be incumbent upon us to revisit the issue of publication of these privileged documents, because if the government has produced them voluntarily, there is no privilege, and the government simply must not be allowed to have it both ways.
Here, here.